I've never had my wife, she told me, never listen to me for an hour and a half straight. So this has been a blessing. This is, I know I'm going to pay for it for the rest of my married life. But does anybody, I'll try and show some video and deal with something pretty quickly to show you how some of the process works in a way that's more engaging than me talking at you. Were there any questions about it? Anything that stood out before I start? Okay, the first thing then, jury deliberations. The difference between, and I'll set it up, the distinction, since it's a Korchak conference, the distinctions between Korchak and our youth court in the spirit and the legacy of Korchak is that again, to be in it, the student acknowledges responsibility, says, I did it. It's been done. I'm here to explain, and the advocate who speaks for the student is here to help repair and to present it and make everything better and stronger and realistic. And I can't show you the actual questioning. This is from a full simulation. I'll show you the deliberations, the jury questions. And the reason why I'm going to show you I'll show you two parts of the process. I'll show you two deliberations for two distinct simulations where the video is very good. The actual court questioning, I couldn't show a real one because it's confidential, but the sound isn't good enough, and I would rather show this is what you get when kids actually are doing, they took it seriously. They took these simulations seriously, and I wanted to show you two different versions. And this is just my class. This is, they ran through they had the trial, they had the session. The person explained why they did what they did, what was done. They were questioned by the jury. Then the jury comes out to a room to deliberate for about 5 minutes, and they mark what's called a constructive disposition. And you can listen to what they focus on and what they think is important. Bear in mind, this is like 3 years ago, and we've really worked to streamline the process. And I want to show you that now. So this is one set. Driver actually, the bailiff reads the papers in the beginning and wrote the impact on the bus driver. Does anybody see a problem with that? I put that in. This is your test. Wojciech gave you tests. I'm giving you a test as well. What's the problem with that?
She's not there for answer any questions.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that would be saying it doesn't matter what the bus driver said, but the impact on the bus driver. And I'll give you a clue again. It's connected to what Judith said. If you make this too lawyerly and you bring in impact of problem on the bus driver, whatever, what are you changing this to? What's that?
Focusing on the past, right?
You are, but there's a word for it. Again, you get to go back to your distinctions. You're making it
Punitive.
You are making it punitive because you're kind of begging the question that somebody needs to be punished for what was done. And I put some language in, the bus driver saying something needs to be done. It's just made, and it's realistic because people are frustrated, and that automatically, so be careful. If you'll have materials, if you want to do a youth court, it will say gather, and that's why I asked Wojciech who gathers the information. Because be careful of all the information you gather and what you do with it. That can help determine the shape of the kind of court that you establish. You get to determine your court. And I talked to somebody about this, and I said, what about an impact statement? He said, put it in. Sometimes you do it, but there's always the risk. And I'm thinking, yeah, the risk is punitive. You kind of seed the cloud with a sense of punishment, and if you don't see it, you'll understand, because then you bring, it's just a different change. But again, the notion of the way these kids are talking with each other is remarkable. They're using that vocabulary. And in the meantime, I'm going to go over something that we don't need to use this for. In the meantime, I think it's important as well. Again, I will always come back to Korchak, and I mean, you should have said you didn't end with Korchak, and I think I ended with I showed the community spirit, but then I flashed the kids, and I'd love to hear their statement. But my final slide was this, and I think you probably, if you're at this conference, this is something you should take, and it's from King Matt. The king suddenly seemed to remember something. This is from King Matt. You know, Matt, we always did the wrong thing by making reforms for adults. Try doing it with the children, and maybe you'll succeed. Why do you think maybe it'll succeed if you try doing it with the children?
Because if it works for children, it'll work for everybody.
That's a good ad, we hope. Wouldn't it also? In one way, I think about the pipeline is if you start early. You know, as I tried to say it with my administrators, if you fill the school from elementary on through middle school, you train your pipeline full of problem solvers. People that talk about what happened and they express themselves, and that becomes a really useful skill. Again, you can march off a whole litany of skills that are going to be valued in your school. Public speaking, critical thinking, fact versus opinion. There was an activity where...
I'm sorry, if
Sure.
you can show...
In the meantime, this is, I mean, that's completely fine. In the materials, I said on the right-hand side of the blue packet, you should have a, no, that's the left side, I think.
Oh, the right side.
Yeah, in the back. Yeah, if you go to the back, I think I put in something that has a scenario. Yes, very good. And then behind it, what do you have behind that? Okay, good.
Sample juror questions.
The sample juror questions, this is important. And behind this, I actually give you my script that I have
It's a pocket which is
Yeah.
at the very bottom on the right
on the
side.
back. Yes, that's exactly where it is. I put the 3 there because I knew that my video would probably not work. So this is a script. You could see the script. If you look at the script, it says at the beginning, bold print indicates that should be spoken by the student. Judge, bailiff, please escort the respondent and youth advocate into the court. They come in. Youth court's now in session. The judge says, bailiff, please read the 6th pillar of character. Bailiff says, trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, citizenship. Judge, bailiff, please announce the Sky Card recipients for this court session. Bailiff says, our Sky Card, Sharpsville, Korchak Youth Card recipients are. Judge, we list the name or names. Congratulations and well done to our honorees. Bailiff, please continue. This is read into the record before every proceeding.
Judith, on the right side at the very bottom, the pocket on the right side.
I'm taking yours.
Yeah, there.
And in the back, the last one is the script. And so Korchak, I make sure that his name is read, it's pronounced, and it's said. And, you know, eventually people, if they don't know, they question. And then you get the sequence of what actually happens in a court and what's done. Now, here's the activity I want us to try. I gave you sample juror questions and a little scenario that says male student responded, punched a hole in the classroom door. Very realistic. Male student responded, punched a hole in the classroom door. Now let me also tell you from Wojciech, I found, again, listening to his presentation was wonderful. He mentioned 3 things from Korchak. A 2-year-old came along and tore the book, and they were holding responsible the child who left the book. I had a case this year. There was a case where somebody took a book and messed on somebody's book. That's a real case. Number 1. Number 2, somebody took somebody's stuff and didn't return it. We had that again this year. First case, it's the same thing when you had the urination on each other and back and forth, whether or not, whatever. I had the kid with the graphic cartoon using an article that disseminates urine. So it was, again, these are real. They're realistic things that show up. It's universal. These kids go through these things, and we had these issues. So a kid punching a hole in a classroom, punching a hole in the classroom door is that's going to happen. And if you follow this thing, this is a manual that would go around and be sent about how to run a youth court and how to create it. It's wonderful. The people are great. These materials come out, and yet, when the kids question as a jury, when they question the kid who did something, I'm the kid who punched the hole in the door. Somebody, you would go through these questions, and this is what kids do when they get, this is actually what the kids get in a manual. If you're a 7th or an 8th grader, is it going to be easy to read this? To read it, you will look down. You see the problem? You will tick off what Anton Grunfeld, who I'm staying with, my wonderful host, for the past few days, called a line item. You will tick off a line item of stuff. Does any child standing before his or her peers want to be part of a line item? They want to be, remember, I want your eyes on me from the feedback we got. I want your tone. I want you to take me seriously. I want you to listen. Do I want you to run through a list of dry questions? I had somebody say on a feedback, they just ran through a list. They ran through a list. I got tired of people running through a list. So here's what it happens. You do the 5 journalist questions, who, what, where, when, and why, or old Kipling things. Male student punched a hole in a classroom door. Jane, you asked me the question.
What's your GPA?
2.7. Alyssa, ask me your question.
Where are you when this happened?
In social studies class. Oh, at least you're looking at me. Siegfried.
Who was around when this happened?
Teacher in the class. Jonathan.
Have you apologized for your actions?
No? Let's see, who else do I have? Alice.
Did you regret punching through the door?
Not really. So, what do you think, if our goal is to understand what harm was created, who was harmed, what was done, how to repair it, what will build a mechanism, how to reinforce the positives in our community, how to respect the court, how to respect the child, how to look at what's possible within that child, what have we actually learned? We're uncomfortable. What else have we learned? Discomfort. What else have we learned from our series of questions that were basically my who, what, where, when, why, Kipling questions, journalist questions? What have I learned really about why the kid punched the door? No. Does the kid have a sense that he was actually respected and listened to of why he punched the door? So what do you think you're going to come up with this sort of, if you have kids reading through a list like this? I mean, sometimes you might come up with something. What do you think? Do you think it's going to, do you think you have a recipe for a beautiful bundt cake here?
The questions aren't coming from the kids.
They're not coming from the kids, and do you see any engagement in the questioner? I called on you to read. You probably wanted to read it clearly, but were you really interested in what I was going to say, or was it a dry question?
I didn't even know what the question had to do with the problem. So
Good.
no.
Good. Do you think you might need to understand the problem first? So and that's the key. When you question and when you do simulations, your focus, you might be, well, I'm going to be observed by my principal. I'm going to be observed by my superintendent. So I want my drama to look beautiful and all my little ducks to be walking upon the pond. So you're going to, and yet you're not going to be doing the actual job that you want to do. The job is to get the heart of questioning. Because if you're going to give kids an active skill, a skill that they can use and grow and build on, active questioning, active listening, engagement, because if you can't ask a follow-up. One of the things, and I didn't mention it about in the, where did you feel there was a problem? One of the kids wrote, why didn't they ask me a blanket follow-up? They just went through the list. Kids will go, if you give a list, kids will go through a list, right? They will go through the list and they'll be happy about going through the list. And they will read the list and no, it's his turn to go through. So in order to avoid this is what I did. Actually, I did it, I think like in September or October, because I just got so frustrated with kids. I didn't have time to train kids because the principal, said, let's just do this. And I said, well, normally what I would do is I would train them, and it was just, no, we want to roll this out and do this. So I didn't have a real chance to train kids. They weren't in literature. They weren't versed in Korchak. And what I got was, what is your GPA? What is your social? What happened to you? What happened to cause you to be referred to youth court? Kid answers, they don't go, when did this incident take place? Where? Who saw it happen? What was happening before the incident took place? What was said? Kids read the list. So what I did was in your blue manual, it's clipped inside. And there's a reason why I did that. That's the important, this is what I think is the key to the process. This where it says the juror questions. All right? Everything that I do is based on practice and repetition and whether or not I think it works or not works. This works. When a middle school kid looks at this, first of all, they like the pictures. Number two, they actually understand what you're asking them to do because they see it in color. They see it as a child will see it. Well, our district doesn't want to do color because it's, you know what, if you want to do something, if you want crap, that's what you're going to give them, right? If you're not going to invest in it, this is what you invest in. And if not, then don't do it. Give them some color. Put a date on. You actually have to go through these, and as you teach them each thing, everything that you teach them is an important aspect of, in my subject, language arts, or in civics or social studies, whatever it is, facts. What are facts that are pertinent? As a lawyer, generally the recitation of facts essentially wins the case. The best recitation of facts wins the case. Because you're presenting the same thing accurately, but you're presenting it in a way that your accuracy is almost persuasive. You need to understand what happened and think and listen what you heard. Because if all you're doing is waiting to deliberate and check off a template, well, give them this, give them that, let them write, let them apologize, you're not going to solve anything. You're just going to pat yourself on the back that you won a court. So you go through all these, and what I did was I took this whole sheet, which was worked, at high school level it worked, and I translate it into middle school friendly color pictures that people respond to, and it's not going to solve it, but it's going to enable you to let them think in terms of pictures. Look at it, if you really want this to work, look at each picture and think what avenues will each of these questions, what happened immediately after, focus on what happened after. What do you mean by after? And have them mark up, give them each a manual, have them mark up follow-up, follow-up. Because if you don't ask a follow-up, you're leaving something on the table that I can't, as the observer, I cannot come in and fix. It's frustrating to me where I see somebody waiting or aching to tell you, just like you said, somebody was teasing me for 2 weeks beforehand. I put that in a simulation. There was one who was being teased, a new kid who was being teased by the person who actually lives close to them, so they're on the bus together, and I think that's the one that was acted out. So I tried to put in things that are real, and that actually is a real thing. If you don't actually acknowledge that and use that in your questioning, when you come back and do the thing that I can't show you on video and deliberate, you're not going to have an authentic, useful resolution. It's just going to be a template, and people will learn, just like detention, say you're sorry, look at a goal, meet my teacher, well, so-and-so is my little for Sharp House, and okay, I'm done. Where have you rebuilt any sort of mechanism? Where have you rebuilt? Where have you affected? Where have you, who's harmed when the door is punched? Think about that. Each of these questions demands, like if I were doing this and I'm doing this as a course, I'm going to, this is a kind of learning opportunity where we're going to come up with a resolution, and it's going to be a crappy resolution. One thing I do is I teach, how many of you are language arts teachers or English teachers? No? Yeah, great. Okay, wonderful. When we have to teach, we teach verbals, gerunds, infinitives, participles. We put these things that affect style. And you can dryly show a kid grammatically what they need to do. You can show them stylistically what a gerund is, what a participle is, how it's something that acts as an adjective, but it's really a verb, so it's powerful, you know, an unanticipated event. You know, you throw something verby at them. And what I do is I give them like 3 sentences, one without just a statement, without any sort of adjective or modifier, and ask them to write about the mood or the tone of the story. Next one I give them is the same set, but with participles, with gerunds, with these verbal modifiers. And it's amazing the difference, and I ask them to write setting, I don't know, setting, conflict, I forget what it is. You guys could do that kind of stuff. And it's amazing the different stories you get, and the people who, they ache to make something of nothing. You know, the one that has nothing, they're making it up, and they're looking, and they want to please you, so they write this card, and it's just nothing. The other ones, it's so easy. They write all this description, and some of them don't even know. Half class I give the good the stuff with writing it, the other half I give nothing, and they're just wondering, where the heck did they come up with that? That's so good. And you know, and then you show this is why it is. It's the same thing with these questioning. You could do as much as you want with it, but there's nothing there. You can dress it up. There is nothing in these answers that will help you come up with a constructive disposition. So, I mean, I can relate this to anything in practice. There's nothing here because I do this. How do you find it? You have to teach the kid to add the modifiers, to add the participle, add the gerund, add the infinitive, add something stylistic to it that will provide something. So in terms of what that means for this, add a follow-up. Who was there? What was going on? What was the feel of the room? That's not hard. Another language arts things. What was the setting like? You know, setting is the atmosphere. So you're giving them another thing. Was it quiet? Was it calm? Was it disruptive? Oh, and the kid can say, if you question, was it calm in the hall? Was everything? No, so it was a little wild. What do you mean by wild? What does that mean? Well, somebody was, and then already you're getting details. Do you follow me? Kids don't they observe and they know, but they don't instinctively write and translate. They've seen it, just like Korchak said, the kid observes it and knows it. You have to prompt it from them. And then for each of these, what is your GPA 2.7? Is that all you're going to ask? Is that all you're going to ask about my GPA? You know, that seems pretty offensive. You know, you're just saying, you know, what's your GPA? I actually have one kid say, what's your GPA? You know, to another kid who did that. And it's like, you know, it's like, are you okay with that? No. Why not? Well, because I'm not eligible for, does that matter? Yeah, Matt. And then it changes. And do you want to be? Yeah. Are you A's and B's? Well, really? Is there something, there's a whole range of things that you can do because part of what you're doing is trying to match a solution to give the kid, like the other school district, a relationship with a teacher that he doesn't currently have, or strengthen one with a teacher that he or she already has, because then you have the advocate. And then you find out, you know, does the kid have an adult advocate? So who was around when this happened? What does that affect? Who was around when this happened? What will that help? What kind of answer will that get? Can you make that a better answer or a better question? Yeah, who was impacted? You know, what do you mean? Well, or you could say, well, who was around? You know, did anybody see you do this? Who saw you? Wow, how you punched the whole, did it hurt? No. Did you make a mark? You know, did somebody see that? Yeah, you know, Susan saw it. Was she there? Yeah. What'd she do? Well, she jumped back. How'd that make you feel? I mean, that's not a probing question, but you understand those aren't hard to get the kids into a questioning dialogue. And here's another thing. This one girl that I quoted, Lauren, loved this kid. Wonderful. She took this on as her, you know, she's older now, but she was so serious as an advocate. And I kept telling them, do not make this is an illegal proceeding. But there's a point in video when I have the session, it's just the recording is very bad, where she did the simulation and a kid asked a question of the person. And Lauren, who was speaking for him, the advocate, objected. Never, never in the course did I teach objections. She said, objection, Your Honor. And I haven't, and the judge said, excuse me, because I didn't sit there and say, on what ground? She says, objection. She already asked that question. That doesn't, could you please rephrase the question? That's all she said. And the girl who asked the question kind of sputtered and then had to ask a more, I would say, a more compassionate question. Again, if you trust in the kid to do that, that was just pure instinct. An objection. It was wonderful. I mean, and I always talk about that. I always say objection because there was nothing that she was told to do, and yet she felt there was something wrong. I had a law professor who taught evidence, and he said his first, he said, if you just know there's something wrong, you just got to say it. Even if you don't know the right grounds, just throw something out there and make it up. He said, and this guy wrote a handbook on it, and his name is John Waltz, and I think he's deceased, but he was a very, very important textbook on evidence. So he was an expert on this stuff, and his first thing was, I think he said, like, his first objection was something like, objection, and everybody turns to him and says, on what grounds? And you're supposed to specifically say, to show you know where the question is not right. He said, he can't say that, and he knows it. And everything stopped, and they look at it, and they try and figure out, but he got out what was important. It was just a fundamental problem with what happened. He knew it was wrong. He didn't know technical. This girl knew something was wrong, and she was an advocate for her charge. And that, to me, was exactly what you want to encourage. And you're not going to encourage it if you read items. The work you put in before you actually do something is going to show up as a benefit in what the kids do, because you can't shortcut this. I have a mound of stuff, and I don't want to apologize for this state, because I know you're not supposed to apologize. Apparently, that's a big deal now. Nobody apologizes for anything. But the idea is, there's a lot to it, but I can point out where your value is. Your value is in authenticity. Your value is finding out what really is a problem, what really is an obstacle, and what really gets people to talk and what gets them to close up. That is your massive toolkit. And then you have to focus on these questions. And if you use this manual, it will help you, because you can then break down each question. They're not a line item. They're actually like an index of somebody's problem. Each one of these is an index of somebody's problem that you're listening to, and they've agreed to present themselves in front of you for. So you have that responsibility to then deal with it. So I think that your questioning and your preliminary work about what are real button-pushing problems, what are obstacles, and in a simulation, do you have something good? Is it workable? Is it realistic? That's where you'll be successful. The rest is just a script. The rest is just a script that you read from, and again, if it comes from the heart and it's sincere, they will feed off it, and they'll better you. They'll fix your problems. I'll be honest with you, the Korchak stuff is still a big mouthful for them to say. But you saw from the newspaper, they know who he is. They know that this was a guy who fought for children. They did not dwell on his death. That's another wonderful thing about these kids in Sharpsville. They did not dwell on the fact that this man walked hand in hand with the children to death in a march that is just something that's out of the darkest version of history. You see this brightest march of light. But they didn't talk at all about death. They talked about, you asked them to say, man, was he funny? That Matchbox, they still laugh about it, and they thought it was funny, and they think of this guy as an advocate, a person for children who had a court and who gave out cards. I'm betting he would prefer to be remembered as a person who was empowered, their stakeholding in a community, and gave each other cards, as opposed to supporting them in a moment, because it was all about, it was about their individual, their stamp, their impact, not only of the future, but of the present. And this made them people of the present. So That I think, and I'm just coming to that as we speak, that really in Sharpsville, they just don't think of him marching to death. And anybody who knows of course, they would say marching to death and marching with the children and how, and which in itself is, it silences you. But these kids know of him as the joy and that power of celebrating their virtue. So I think that is probably the best thing that we have added to something that he did that we don't do exactly the way he did, but we do in his spirit. I will say in the cards, I do mention what happened, but that simply is just part of, telling a complete story. I think you have to tell the complete story. So if you have, I think, focusing again, buttoning, what buttons, what pushes your buttons, de-escalation, obstacles, and then dealing with a simulation to come up with whether or not somebody felt you actually understood them when you dealt with them and their problem. That's where you'll be successful. And then just follow the script and put it together. The other ones, if you have any questions about this, I'm here tomorrow as well. If you look through this and you say, hey, there's one of those handouts I don't get. Why'd you put that in there? What is it? Just ask me, and I'll help you. I wanted to give you enough to put together something, or at least to understand the value of what's presented to you. This is giving you this beautiful gift. This man and the people that follow in his legacy are giving you this beautiful gift to share with children who need it. They need what he offered, and what he offered was an understanding of what they are, not what they could be, what they are. And together, one of your slides, I love your presentation. One of your slides where you say there's this, it's now and then or whatever. I forget how it was, but that's what it is. It is of the future, but it's of the present. It's who they are, what they can become, but they and you demand to deal with their now. And if you deal with their now, you're going to make a better culture in your school. I'm still trying. I'm still, and I think these victories, I think the major victory I have is being able to now move it towards a singular course where I can teach his short stories. Tomorrow I'll talk briefly, I'll just add in some of the things that we've done in terms of language arts with his short stories and with his postcards. And I have all sorts of stuff from kids. So it's not technical, it's not video, but you'll see what these, what you can do with it, and I guarantee it's something that you can incorporate not only in your class, but you can do anything with communication cards, and I even changed the cards to work with the Island on Bird Street. So there's a lot to it.
If I can stop you for a
Yeah.
second. So let's take 5 minutes if you have questions for the part which we heard today. And Ira will be with us tomorrow as well.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering why you would even give them a script at all. Like, is there, partly I can understand why some questions might be intrusive or inappropriate in a group. Why wouldn't it be sort of like kids just sort of ask whatever comes to mind in the moment?
Excellent. Here would be the answer. Because you really do need to define the problem. You really need to define what happened. And you have to give them structure. Again, I'll go back to Korchak. You can't just let them exist the way you give them the boundaries, and they will be creative within the boundaries. Give them the scope of what needs to be done, and they will enlarge it, or they will, as he said, and I agree with that. You need to determine who was harmed, what was the harm, and how you can fix it. So however you want to break it down, make sure those are covered. And you can provide whatever script you want to do. I think that the journalist questions work perfectly because, again, I try and protect what I do from scrutiny from a board saying this is not language arts. You have state standards that you are legally required to cover, so I cover them. And I'll cover things with them, and they have to critically think how it works that way. So, yeah, you have to figure out who, what the harm was, and fix it. So yes, you can ask your own questions, but I would defer to Korchak on that one. Give them some boundaries, and the boundaries are determinate, and then within that, be creative, be a lioness, be a lion on the questions. Understand you're going to get to the root of the problem. The more vigorous you are, you'll dig out the root cause. And then once you know it, then it's part, I should probably put in an activity of when you notice there's a problem, the awareness moment, because that doesn't naturally come. As an adult and an experienced person, you can say, ooh, 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 ooh. Where's that? Ooh, 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 ooh. Where's that moment? But again, I would say you need some sort of script, and that's why I made that a very limited template. There's a lot of room for them to write notes or follow-ups. Does that help? Yeah. And then go back to Korchak and say he wanted a script. Maybe he would say give them a script. They need to know what to do. Let them figure out how to get it done, but this is what needs to be done. Would I be characterizing Korchak correctly in that respect?
I would agree with that, yeah.
Because there's the inventiveness within the script. And a court, again, you have to give it respect. Don't disrespect the punitive aspect of it. Don't disrespect the tribunal. It is a tribunal. I think a big problem that I've noticed too is confidentiality. Kids talk about it. And that's depressing to me, But I think, again, you have to establish a culture. And the more you establish a culture with it, people maybe, again, Korchak had a thing, a week to 2 weeks without anything against you, you participate. You have to have a culture where the kids police themselves and realize the importance of it themselves. That's a good question. I mean, it's a first-class question.
Jane, you have a question?
So my understanding of restorative justice is that both sides have to agree to participate. Does that enter into what you're doing?
Absolutely. There's, at the beginning of the process, the principal, here's another issue you might have with your principal or putting in a school district. The administration has to surrender jurisdiction of a problem. Nobody wants to surrender jurisdiction. My principal doesn't want to deal with this. She hates it. She feels like that's so against the child. She would rather not spend any time in the day focusing on punishing a child. This is why she likes this aspect. At the beginning, the kid is presented, and I think I even put a hand item with the youth court right at the beginning. You sign a diversion, meaning you have two paths. The kid can either take traditional punishment that the school offers for the offense, like detention or whatever, or can choose youth court. If the kid chooses youth court, then then the child knows that they'll be assigned an advocate to work with them. They'll make their statement very quickly. Then they'll have a session. And if the child then doesn't follow on and do what's required, then it goes right back to traditional discipline. And they will then be handled as though they didn't go through youth court. And that's how that works. Good. Yeah, you have to agree. You have to agree. And the letter that I sent you, that I put in the materials, was the letter that the principal put in at the start of last year, where she alerted for the handbook that she would determine that parents do not have to sign. She will determine the cases that are diverted to youth court. So it's her decision or his decision. And believe me, that's a big decision, because school officials don't want to surrender discipline. Unless you get one who really doesn't. We're lucky. Our discipline issues are not, discipline issues that some people face in the school to prison pipeline. But, things are always changing. So that, again, that's a great question, because that it is. You have to agree. That's a technical question. Anything else? It can be technical. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm just curious, like what, can you describe like a typical case in this like youth sport? Like what kind of stuff going through, and what it turn out to be?
Okay, a typical thing is a typical thing that you're going to get in middle school, where kids either are disrespectful to each other, whether I had one, I didn't particularly want to do it because a kid poked another kid with a pencil. I'm thinking, I don't want that. I don't think that should be youth court. That's a personal injury. That's something that there's, just like Wojciech said in his, there was vulgar pictures or vulgar actions. There was destruction of property. There were kids that were being disrespectful to substitute, swearing. There were all the things that you get a normal kid that would do. And were they all successful? No. Did we have repeat offenders? I would not want a repeat offender. I told, unlike Korchak, who was loaded, his was different. His first, up until hundreds, was all forgiveness, forgiveness, forgiveness. But ours is the kid takes responsibility. And I'll tell you an interesting story too. We had a community activist who was a guy who was involved in gangs and who had all sorts of trouble. And he came in and he turned his life around. He was a rapper, and he came in and he introduced himself that he was part of a community group, and we used him at the school. And I said, this is fantastic, because he could be, we could assign, like, the kids spend a couple hours a day with him. Like, he would have the kids walk around. Maybe he would have them, rake outside, or he would have them do something. He would just talk to them. He was really, really, I found him to be a genuine guy, authentic guy, really caring. He interacted with kids, and middle school kids like a cool guy or a cool girl. And I made him part of the possibility in some dispositions. Here's the problem. He was so authentic and so realistic that there were some things that they found out, that the school board found out, that he had been involved in currently, that he no longer was able to associate with the kids. Like nothing, I mean, it was like whether it was, I don't know, it wasn't horrible, but it was stuff where it was just made it uncomfortable. But, my point is, well, okay, what kind of authenticity do you want? Do you want sanitary authenticity, or do you want authenticity? If you've got a kid who's got a real problem, who can relate with somebody, but apparently, I mean, the issue was substantial, it was tough with the police, I don't know. But that to me is a great opportunity. If you can get somebody like a community group, I put in the materials as well, some research and some packets or information of what you could put in, what are things like community service, whatever. Because I have middle school kids, I can't really do community service too much. I like the fact that they could work with this gentleman. I really focus on school initiatives, because then you kind of, you bring them within the school community. Sort of like the story, and I'm sure you probably heard it, or somebody told you the story where Korchak was put on trial or was for putting the girl up in the tree. Did they discuss that with you? And oh, I'm not going to spoil any thunder, but I'm not going to talk about it.
1 minute you have.
Okay, I won't talk about it, but the point was, his whole goal for doing this was to get the community to understand that his thing wasn't right and to bring the kid back. So regardless of how he acted, the community rose in defense of a child, and that was what was valuable. So, those are things that you have to take stock of. Look, take a real record of things that your school does. I mean, I made a list of our initiatives, and we have more, and these are kinds of things that you can put in and kind of sprinkle into your kids' minds. You don't want to shape it, because then you're doing the job, but you have to give them ideas. And if you give them the ideas, they'll come up with something good. But my goal in this part is focus on the questioning and focus on what's authentic.